Okay, welcome to. I've been live for a few minutes. Thank you, YouTube. Anyway, welcome to a grand day. It is what is this? November 18th in the year of our Lord 2025. And we have somebody that has a birthday today, if you've read the title of this, right? Someone who's been in pop culture and has influenced a lot of things, brought a lot of a lot of I don't know what's the word, grandeur and respect and things to comics. And gave it I don't know, he's sort of like what Eddie Van Halen was to rock and roll, if you will, right? Gave it some validation with pure talent. And I'm also at an age myself to where like all the nasty things he has said and ridiculous things that he has said over who knows the past decade or more and stuff like that. I don't care. So I grew up with his comics. I grew up at a great time where he hit America and I got to be around a lot of that stuff as it came out. I was able to look forward to books coming out. I got to be surprised when I heard things were coming out over the years and stuff like that. And we'll just take a minute here to also say, I was going to go with a joke there, that it's also the 63rd birthday of one Kirk Hammett of Metallica. So let's not forget about old Kirk there. And what a great day, man. There's a lot of great birthdays today. Anyway, Mr. Alan Moore, right? So, I mean, does the guy really need an introduction at this point? Maybe not now. Maybe to the younger folks who were not around in the 1900s. Um, um, but we'll do one anyway because maybe in the future we need to, right? This is an amazing heroes from 1985. And strangely enough, Alan Moore still looks like this, right? Just with gray hair, right? The man has done a lot. He's a magician, a sorcerer, an occultist. Okay, lives on the dark side. He worked in a fish market. Okay, he was born in 1952. I think he had imports that he read over in Great Britain, things like Black Hawk and Fantastic Four, American comics that came over there. He did fanzines, underground comics. He made it to 2000 AD. And then in the 80s, he was like the first of the British invasion to really come to be drafted, to be approached to do American comics while he was living over where Northampton or something like that. Strange places, strange names, things that are very common today. But as you read the letters column and the editorials and started hearing this name Alan Moore over the years, when you were a young lad, when it was all about Kirby and Gil Kane covers and John Byrne, Chris Claremont, Marv Wolfman, George Perez, this guy comes up and everything. He's writing very dark things with very literary tools, very literary, with literary tools that were very much with mature themes and things like that, right? So that's what I'm saying. You can just build up the merits in what he brought to comics. But like I said, it's a validation. And good grief on this channel. If I say Watchmen one more time, I'm sure there's people out there that will rip their hair and stuff, right? A staple of this channel is Watchmen being I don't know. I probably read it probably by this time uh, over 200 times easily since about 1988. I've seen things in Watchmen that I think you can only see from reading it over and over and things like that, right? So, what we're going to do is just for a little bit, we're going to talk about Alan Moore here, and it's going to be confined to what's on my shelf behind me, right? Because sadly, I have to work tomorrow. I have things to do. Hey, what's up, Mr. Gretzky? Great to see you. Yeah, I'm so glad you could be here. So let me take this moment, this opportunity, this time to say, please subscribe, hit the bell to know when we do these things. You never know whose birthday is going to come up or whose funeral. And like the video, share it, let people know we're out here and things, right? So as I look around this room, okay, over here to my right, I have 5 boxes, short boxes of Alan Moore comics. One just says Alan Moore. One is his image stuff, Supreme, Providence, some Omega Man comics where he did backups. I don't have my, they're pretty far over there. And then I have a whole box dedicated to his Swamp Thing. And then the other stuff that I'm probably cannot see past the light that I have set up here is probably his ABC comics, and that would be the Promethea, you know, the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, um, Tom Strong, those great books, Tomorrow's Stories, and that's actually where we're going to kind of start because I have this stuff out. I think one of his best works, and I'll tell you why I think it works, using his own words at one point, would be the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. Here's the omnibus edition that I keep on the shelf that I I got this for a steal, but it's volume 1 and 2. Right, we have there's many League of Extraordinary Gentlemen here behind me, right, but this is the first two miniseries that came out, and we have Mr. Hyde, right? These are all Victorian era literature, literary characters that are thrown in here to become a bit of a team for the government, right? Alan Quatermain, Mr. Hyde, the Invisible Man, a lot of H.G. Wells and Bram Stoker and things, Mina Harkness and stuff like that, right? And he put them all together to sort of have a team. And there's a legacy here where the English government has always brought people together, Scarlet Pimpernel all the way to James Bond. But what Kevin O'Neill and Alan Moore were doing, were just taking all sorts of pop culture and throwing it in here to make this fantastic story using established characters. Now, by no means was this an original idea. The execution is original, but I feel like the guy to go to here with this would be Philip Jose Farmer with his Wald Newton novels from the late 60s, early 70s, where he he tied a lot of characters together. Sherlock Holmes, Doc Savage, the Spider, the Shadow, all this stuff before. He had his way of doing it, and Warren Ellis had his way of doing it. J. Michael Straczynski had a way of doing it a little bit there. But the one that really set it off in comics was indeed League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And I hope you've read it. You should definitely read the first two volumes. Now, what's interesting is that um, not just, of course, were there Alan Moore fans when this came out, and but there were other people who really got into this, and there was a whole website dedicated to annotations of the first two volumes of The Extraordinary Gentleman, the Black Dossier, Century, the Tempest, which was actually Alan Moore's last comic, Kevin O'Neill's also. Kevin O'Neill's passed away, which is kind of, I find it amazing that Alan Moore has made it to 72 years old, because I've seen many interviews where he talked about he had to start questioning reality structured as it is because of the LSD, the smoking I've seen him do in interviews and things like that, if I remember right. Very much of the 60s and 70s drug culture and stuff, as I'm sure he would say also. But anyway, to get off of that. But there was a whole website dedicated to people coming in and doing annotations of all the characters that popped in there, right? He had the Dictator pop up, Charlie Chaplin's speaking role, if you will, from a 1940s movie or something like that, right? So there were also 3 books that came out: Heroes and Monsters, A Blazing World, and there's a third one that's just too pricey for me to find, right? And they get in there and they really dissect this whole world and all the characters and the literature that he pulled these from. Now, the reason I think this works, and when in comics you have things like retcons where they'll change history or insert stories in between the pages of those comics, or the whole idea of before Watchmen, where we get prequel stories before his Watchmen book that he was against and did not want to do, and they did it anyway. It's where the bloom kind of came off the rose, in my opinion, of what you can and can't do with Watchmen. Was the fact that he didn't go back in time; he moved the characters forward. There's a lot of people felt he was being a tad hypocritical, at least as I can say online, for whatever worth that is, where people get clout just by sort of saying edgy things. It's kind of, you really need to know them to know if they're being sincere or not. But anyway, but I don't want to get into it too much, go too deep into it. But a lot of people felt he's being hypocritical, not wanting to support before Watchmen. And here he is doing Leave Extraordinary Gentlemen. Those were mine and Dave's characters. Well, these weren't your characters. Well, he moved them forward. And I'm pretty sure in an interview over the years, that's kind of what he pointed out. I was sitting there, and the reason I remember that is that that was what I was doing with the comic book talk somewhere on this channel way back in the day. If the person's channel is even up in some of the original roundtables with other comic book YouTubers of the past years. Oh, well, Newton alert. That is right, Paolo. Great to see you. I see a large Rasputin beard. I press watch. Nice. That's fantastic. I need to get a Leave Extraordinary Gentleman in trade. That says the Gretzky. I think the first two volumes and maybe the dossier is what you need, but there's something else I'll show you in a minute. So for everybody that's popping in, I have 5 boxes of short boxes of Alan Moore comics over there. I didn't finish what I was saying over there. I have this shelf of hardbacks, so big and heavy that it's bending my shelves on a 30-year-old shelf that I have. But I'm looking over here without squinting, and I can see my Lost Girls slipcase. Down there, I have my Absolute Watchmen and various editions and other things. So we're going to stick with what's on my shelf as we move our Rock Lord over. But we're going to kind of stick with what's here, right? And we're going to move along and stuff, right? So we're talking about the Leave Extraordinary Gentleman. So we have Century that came out. That was a volume. I have the Tempest put up, guys. But so these are the ones that a lot of people will realize, right? Century took a while to come out. It was 3 square bound huge editions that came out through Top Shelf. I forgot about that, right? And amazing, I got this for $10. So I was buying them, and the whole point of it is that it happened after the Black Dossier here, but this took place over a century is kind of what they're getting at, if I remember this right. Each of the 3 books had the year that it was taking place, and it was all about the coming of the Antichrist, filling it full of literary characters and characters of pop culture and things like that throughout the years. I think it took place from the 1950s to 2010 that I'm recalling this, and it was going to end with Harry Potter being the Antichrist, right? Harry Potter like. And it was very interesting to read interviews with Alan Moore at the time, because he realized that in the way that he had studied history and the research he had done over the decades, like for books such as From Hell and this and whatnot, that he realized he knew more about the Victorian era of England than he knew of the 2000s. So his daughter kind of came in and had to explain a few characters. And of course, being Alan Moore, complaining that comics got grim and gritty after his work and he had guilt for taking away innocence, he took a character like Harry Potter and had his wand be a phallic image that shot lightning. So I'm just saying, we can say one thing, Alan, but we do another. What can you say, right? Now I have a hardback and hardback. We got to knock those. And then I have my reader copy here that still has the sticker from probably where I bought this used somewhere. Just need to clean that up. The Black Dossier, right? This is more or less volume 3 or of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. For a lot of people, I say get the first 2 volumes that came out through Wildstorm, and then maybe check out the Black Dossier, because it kind of gives you a history. It's just packed full of little. This is a rich book with a lot of variety in it and stuff, right? My God, it even has a set of 3D goggles for you to read when you go into the blazing world. Okay. But this is where the studying really had to come out. There's many art styles by Kevin O'Neill. There's prose. They do things in the style of the 1920s. You see scripts. Like I said, it's more of an experience. There's old postcards so you can follow the story. The Black Dossier is actually the book you hold. This is when Alan Moore was really starting to get meta again, right? He started getting meta with people realizing you can change reality with a book, like he did with Judgment Day at Wildstorm. Not Wildstorm, but when Rob Liefeld had left Image, and after he had dabbled at Wildstorm a little bit, he did Awesome Books, where he sort of did this book called Judgment Day. where characters were reading a comic book and could figure out and change reality and stuff, right? Well, as they are running through here, yeah, cross your eyes. This is what I'm trying to tell you. He's brilliant. Okay. I mean, Alan Moore, it's one thing to say these things. These things, some of his ideas are the kind of ideas where you're and Grant Morrison as well, and Warren Ellis as well, in my opinion, and Gardner Fox, that it sounds like they're smoking pot and they're all like, there's a car that runs on water. Well, he can do the execution of this. So the Black Dossier is what you have in your hands. That's what they're after in the book. All right. Again, if you read it, you read it, right? But this is some of my favorite work at all, right? So you had Nemo in the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So there's three stories that came out of the daughter of Nemo that go through time. And my favorite is River of Ghosts, right? These were three hardback books that came out. I was lucky enough to get them discounted, new as it came out. Yeah, the Roses of Berlin and the Heart of Ice. I think a lot of people dig the Heart of Ice out of this, right? But these are stories of Nemo's daughter as she took off and picked up the legacy and stuff like that, right? The River of Ghosts is my favorite because we get references to the creature from the Black Lagoon. It's kind of brought up in the first two volumes in an ad somewhere in the background or something. And then in this, we really get to see them just on a page. Watch me not be able to find it now. A lot of fembots in there. But yeah, you can go. Yeah, here we go. This is absolutely fantastic. We'll just slowly let you take that in as they're going down the Amazon in the 1890s, I believe, or something, early 2000s. This is decades before the Creature from the Black Lagoon movie. So yeah, that's my favorite. So yeah, this is one of his more brilliant works, in my opinion. And I know I'm saying brilliant, but there's definitely a passion in there that Moore had for these stories and these characters. It really, I don't know if we there's no way of knowing what was going through his head when he's writing these unless he tells us. But there are times you can read something and you can feel that they're inspired or they're having fun. You know what I mean? And that's what it really feels like. Having fun. All right. Moving right along. So over the years, oh my gosh, before he came to America, he was doing things in Warrior Magazine that had V for Vendetta in it. DR and Quench over at and I'm doing this from the hip, guys. I came straight home from work, set this up, got to set this show up, went and had something to eat, and then came down here. DR and Quench and a few other things going on at 2000 AD, and there are collected volumes of his earlier work, Shocking Futures and Twisted Times. These are put out through 2000 AD. And there's a checklist. What I like is there's a checklist on the back of these for their collected editions like this. And this is really fun to kind of go through. You get an introduction of what was going on at the time with Alan, and these were put out solely because Alan had blown up, But yeah, you get to see a lighter side of what he was doing. Alan Moore actually tried to start out as an illustrator, and going off the top of my head, he was doing comic strips with a cat, and he started realizing that he was not talented enough to do that for a living, so it's why he started drawing. There's a lot of Thargs feature shocks in this, right? Now, usually I could go on and on about Alan Moore work. There's a few things that I don't think they're all hits and misses and stuff like that. But I was really shocked when I read this, and I felt some of the EC. I felt like there was some EC Comics. I don't know, EC Comics sci-fi vibe going on here. I don't know, man. But some of the things that he has going on, but all the stuff there for a young Alan Moore honing his craft, you can get in here and see in these short stories and these short pages what he was doing, that the ideas are there, the characterization is there, genius is pain, things like that. Because one of the books that I'm now remembering, and I'm not going to jump up and go grab it, was a character named Herbie that debuted in the 50s. And Herbie was irresistible to women. He had the power of God through genetics and also through his lollipops that he could walk on air. And then he had a superhero persona where he put on long underwear, a plunger on his hat, a domino mask, and this was all done seriously. And I can feel a lot of that stuff going on in there. The next thing that we have here that's on the shelf, and I'm just going, for what's over behind me, just grabbing it, was the Miracle Man. Okay. Oh, let me do some of this here. Paolo, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Volume 1. League in Volume 2 are still much alike. Black Dossier is not. It's Alan Moore unfiltered and unrestrained. It might put some people off, but they would definitely miss out. That's the thing. If I want to recommend for someone to spend the money, I think you start at the beginning, because what he was doing at Wildstorm was much more the whole point of America's Best Comics that was being published by Wildstorm, ABC Comics, was Alan Moore, his twist there, his catch, his gimmick or whatever, was his apology for taking the innocence out of comics with Killing Joke and The Watchmen. And America's Best Comics was a way to go back to the roots of things. Tom Strong was like a pulp character. You follow what I'm saying? These characters in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen had a hand in influencing comics through the years and things like that, right? So that was the catch. Well, he said he would never work for DC again, especially after the Watchmen fiasco. However you want, whatever side you take of that. Was it work for hire? Did DC screw him over, saying you can have these characters back when they're never in print? I don't know. But anyway, but he ended up working at Wildstorm. Wildstorm was bought out by DC. He kept putting the books out because he had too many people making money for a living, working on the books that he's putting out. And then as soon as he could get to his conclusion with ABC Books, he jumped over and started doing things his way. And Black Dossier was your transition into the unfiltered Alan Moore, as Paolo put it. John is here. Great to see you. I was grocery shopping, which you should be. You need food. Okay. So moving on here, what we have here is Miracle Man, right? And this was one of the reasons that Alan Moore had a little bit of a problem wanting to work with Marvel. At least that's what he said at the time, right? Who knows how things have changed over the last decade, right? But he still is known as the original writer, and he's also known as Kurt Vile. Okay, he's had pen names. But with these books, with Marvel putting them out, the latest editions, this book ended up, I was very nervous when Marvel said they were going to be putting them out. Okay, because this book changed a lot in comics, right? This was the idea of a Captain Marvel coming into the real world, right? So basically, this was Marvel Man. Captain Marvel comics were huge in Britain, and then you had the lawsuits between DC and Fawcett Comics, and all of a sudden they did not have their reprints. So this guy Mike Angelo came up, and it was a blatant archetype, if you will. He used Captain Marvel and Captain Marvel Jr., all of them as an archetype, and they got Marvel Man, and they continue. He started writing the stories. And then Alan Moore came about the character, and in Warrior magazine, before it came to America, he was I think that's right, yeah, Warrior magazine, if I remember right. But anyway, it came over here. Now all of a sudden, this is like in the real world, superpowers in the real world before Watchmen and things, right? So basically, you had this guy who was pot-bellied, a little bit of an amnesia, kind of a little bit of a loser. Well, he finally says the magic word. He had Komodo, and it turns out that's atomic backwards. I think atomica is atomic backwards, and he gets transformed into Marvel Man. Now, thanks to Marvel doing what Marvel, the Marvel's taken a lot of people over the years to court, and sometimes just to just to break them, right? Defiant Comics, they put them out of business, even though Marvel lost the case against them. They caused them to use up all their funds in court. That's why we lost Defiant Comics, things like that, right? So they came up with another name when this hit America, and it became Miracle Man, right? through Eclipse Comics. Um, he was already doing Swamp Thing. He was kind of getting notoriety, and they started putting this out. Now, this was fantastic. I was able to read a friend of mine's copies. Robert Bird was his name. We'll just leave it at that. And I was able to. That's where I was able to read these, and this was like these. This was amazing, right? So some of the things that were going on was how Miracle Man, they dealt with violence. It was, like I said, real violence, and maybe they Miracle Man killed somebody by taking him up in the atmosphere and giving him a kiss and just watching him die, turn to ice, more or less, in space. At the edge of our atmosphere. Then there's this fantastic scene, my favorite page that is stuck in my head since I was probably about 15 or 16 or something, is you see a point of view, right? You're looking at the fist, like you're the one flying, right? And I think there's like a tree, and then the next panel, the tree explodes. There's a rock, and then the rock explodes as he keeps going. And then there's a guy with a gun guarding a door, and then he explodes. Okay, he's like a meat sack on a train, right? Hit by a train, right? So that's what was going on with this guy, right? So it turns out that all the comic books uh, happened, but they're implanted memories. This was an experiment. If you have read Next Men and probably seen some sci-fi movies here and there where people were hooked up to machines and things like that. But anyway, there was alien technology in there. Apparently there's alien technology that they were using to convert this, right? So I'm going to get caught up in dragging all this stuff, right? So this was really cool. A lot of people were talking, came out sporadically. Alan Davis Art, Fetch came on there, I think, or Total Bomb. Anyway, a lot of people came over there, and we got a spectacular, I don't know, 15 or 16 issues, playing around with the mythology and exploring what would happen of how a super being, he ended up becoming, would affect the world. He ended up becoming something that was divine, right? Divinity and things like that. And it was hyper violent, a little bit hypersexual. You can say realistic, you can say hyper, whatever you want to do. Miracle Woman is presented. They have a baby. They actually showed the birth of a baby in a comic book. And then we had the concept of Kid Miracle Man. Kid Miracle Man had stayed in his adult form and stayed a kid in his civilian identity. And that became a battle so great it destroyed London. And then all of a sudden we had the Age of Miracles where took Neil Gaiman a little bit to get there, right? So the rights of this book made it a little bit infamous. Mark Farland said he had it. Gaiman said he had it because it was held over. Eclipse Comics went out of business. That's what started it all, right? I'm just kind of giving you the smell of all this stuff, right? And then over the years, and like I said, McFarlane and Neil Gaiman were in an actual court fighting over this. And then when court was, I don't know if they were adjourned or whatever happened, some kid walks up and McFarlane and Neil Gaiman take a publicity photo with the kid in the courtroom, I think, or something, right? And you're just sort of like, what the hell? So the McFarlane, Neil Gaiman stuff, I'm not going to go off on that, but yeah, but anyway, that's a whole other video, and it's been well documented, but I don't know how kids know about it today, considering it was 30 years ago. But over the years, Gaiman ended up handing that stuff over to Marvel, along with some characters that he created for Todd McFarlane, and they did Angela mostly. An angel who hunted spawns, and they ended up tying her into Odin, being Odin's daughter or something. Totally destroyed that character. But they were going to put these books out, which they did monthly. Because when Eclipse Comics went out of business, there was an issue or two. The way I remember, and friends of mine remembered, we were waiting to see when that last issue of Miracle Man was going to come out. So Marvel kind of dropped the ball on this a little bit because it took forever to get it out. And I was real nervous about people reading this because it had grown. The mystique had grown over the years. When this was coming out in the 80s, it was groundbreaking, but it had a hand in influencing so many things on the giant page of comics, if you will, the library of comics, that when you read it, it's not going to have the same punch. You know what I mean? This is one of the books that introduced the concept of, you know, Superboy Prime, the way he is from the real world, and when he fights superheroes and stuff, he actually rips their arms off. By it all came from this. That's what I'm trying to get at. So a lot of people, I figured they were going to be underwhelmed. There needed to be an essay in front of the book to explain why this was so big, right? So anyway, Miracle Man. I highly recommend reading it. The Red King, especially the Red King syndrome, to get you going. Like I said, these are what's on my shelf. This is what I grab. But the Red King syndrome, I really enjoyed that. That's the book 3 in Olympus. That's the one that's wild. So yeah. Okay, guys, from hell. And then I'm going to read some comments before I get into this. Have to keep an eye on the time. All right. Oh man, I'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. From hell, I messed up at Heroes Con one year. There was a table that had $5 soft covers, $10 hard covers, and they had a colorized version of From Hell. Well, I have the single issues for each chapter of From Hell colorized. All right. And then I have quite a few of the original. This took forever to come out. Okay. I really wished I looked up the publication date to kind of show you an issue would come out. It would go on. This is the one where the mystique about this was Alan Moore supposedly spent 5 years. At least that's what, in the 90s before the internet, somewhere in the zeitgeist. I don't know if there was an interview or if maybe he was quoted or misquoted or not. I really don't know at this point. But I've heard the story for so long, I kind of believe it. I don't know. But supposedly he spent about 5 years studying the whole concept of Jack the Ripper. And he was like, this is probably who did it. And he brought in secret societies and the royal family and all sorts of things. But he brought in Eddie Campbell to do this, right? And I thought this was absolutely fantastic, but I also thought that this was going to be something that I read one time, right? So right off the bat, we see the art style that's in here. This is very black and white, very pen and ink. And he takes his time telling the story. And we know who the killer is pretty quick. Now, chapter 2 really almost took me out of it because chapter 2, you have Jack the Ripper with his lackey going around London explaining how this building, this monument came from Egypt, and this is made of materials from, I don't know, the Middle East and all these things. But when you look at a map of London, it makes like a 6-pointed star, and they're saying that the Masons are the hard Masons or something did some secret society. We have them around here, and I can't believe I can't think of what they're called of all things to go blank on. That's probably going to protect me in the end. So From Hell, I tell you what, man, it is just a a little bit of work to read, but it's actually rewarding. Okay. This is hyper Allen. This is something you do not rush through. Okay. However you want to read it, a chapter at a time. I think the only way this could have came out was sporadically as it did over many years. It's also something that I've come to appreciate more now that it's been out. And yes, it was made into a movie, and that movie barely gives you a smell of how dense the story is. If I remember right, you also get his annotations from panel by panel, annotations of his research and what he found and why he put it in there. So I'm trying to tell you, you don't read this one, you experience it and then study it. We'll just stick that here for now. What else do we have? Okay. So we're going to have 2 books that aren't his most popular works. Okay. And I'm probably going to mess up this one because it's been a while since I've read it. But the first one, the most underrated book by Alan Moore, in my opinion, is actually a prequel hardback by Alan Moore and Gene Ha called The 49ers. And this is how the city of Top 10 is a city of heroes. but there's no vigilantism going on, right? If you want to be a cop and fight crime, you apply to be a cop and you go through the academy and stuff like that. So everybody in the city uh, are superheroes, and they have train stations for you to travel in the multiverse and things through the bleed or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So they reference a lot of stuff. There's a lot of Easter eggs in it, also, a la. You know, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen has its theme. Well, this has the theme of superheroes and sci-fi, things like that. You can find you can just find all sorts of characters in the background. You know who they are. It's Law and Order kind of meets League of Extraordinary Gentlemen with superheroes. Okay, but this in tone is very, very different. The comedy aspect and the law and order effect of it is extreme, very different. After World War II, all the superheroes, it's revealed, you finally find out what's going on in this world. All the superheroes are forced to move to the city, and you have this young boy. The year is 1949. Science heroes and war champions are gathering in the city of Neapolis. Now under construction, the city is under construction as a home for those with extra human powers and talents. One of those heroes is a very young ace pilot, Steve Trainer, also known as Jet Lad. Fresh from the battle torn skies of Europe and anxious for a new life and career. With him is his former enemy combatant, Lenny Mueller, the Sky Witch, fleeing the defeat of Germany, ready to prove herself worthy of the chance that has been given to her in Neapolis. They are wholly prepared for the challenges facing the experimental city. Science crime and unearthly gang violence has swiftly followed the heroes in the new wide open environment. New friendships were formed with men such as Wolf of the Sky Sharks, kind of like the Blackhawks, a band of fighting air aces, and Ramon Morales, the Black Rider, a motorcycle riding crime fighter. And new enemies quickly surface, including former Nazi scientists and the venomous bloodsucker crime gang. The vampires are trying to form the mob. Will their courage and skills be enough for the task ahead? And this is just fantastic with what's going on. The city is being built. They're walking around. The more you know about 1930s and 40s comics and a little bit of movies and stuff, the more you're going to appreciate the backgrounds. Um, and it's just kind of his journey through this town, and he's just kind of dedicated to being something. He just doesn't know what. And then he's also, I'm gonna go ahead and tell you there's a little bit going on. You find where he's dealing with his sexuality, but you don't know it. He gets real nervous with a girl, and you think he's just a hayseed and things like that, right? So that's what I'm trying to tell you. This is a brilliant. This is just tonally. This is a fantastic written book. Just one of Alan Moore's more underappreciated works, and I'm kind of glad it is. Okay, let me take this minute here. If you're enjoying the show, or if you're checking in, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, and definitely leave a comment. What we got going on here? Happy birthday, Alan! That's right, John. Greetings. Afro SF is here. Great to see you. Afro SF says, "I love Miracle Man. I've known Alan Moore as a miserable guy, but I'm glad the made more Mick Angel. I'm glad he made sure Mick Angelo and his family got the royalties from sales. That's fantastic." Creators' rights there. Yeah. If you read the Hellspawn miniseries from Image, you can see a buildup of the return of Miracle Man. I have 2 or 3 of the issues where Mike Moran, that's his name, if I'm going by memory, I have him right in a box in the table right behind this camera. Yeah. Yeah. Which had to be abandoned because of the court battle. Yeah. Yeah. I have a couple of the issues where that's supposedly him. Now, for Avatar Press, there was a couple of stories that Alan Moore had a hand in, and they have a lot to do with H.P. Lovecraft. Now, this one here, oh God, I can't think. There's a story here that my friends have told me I need to check out if I enjoyed Providence. Providence was a 12-issue maxi series, takes place in like the 19 teens or 20s or something. So basically, going by memory, there is a reporter, an author of some sort, of journalist maybe, and he's going to make his way up to to meet H.P. Lovecraft. Um, and what's very weird is a lot of things happen that if you know H.P. Lovecraft, there's a lot of things that happen in the background and to the character. And this is a very creepy book at times. Okay. And what happens is when H.P. Lovecraft and this person meet, it's at the end of it, it sets off a spell that's going to take time. It's going to take time. And then he makes it very meta because all of a sudden the question is that had to be this had to have really happened because it went forward in time all of a sudden, and they were trying, and the author points out to you, how in the world could a man who wrote creepy little stories end up being a huge part of pop culture, 100 years later. Okay, you know what I mean. Um, in this complete volume of Alan Moore's quintessential horror series, inside this tomb, Moore deconstructs all of H.P. Lovecraft's concepts and mythos, reinventing the entirety of his work inside a painstakingly researched framework of American history, both sequel and prequel to the Neonomicon. That's it. I haven't read that. I think it's just 4 or 5 issues. Providence begins in 1919 and blends the mythical vision of H.P. Lovecraft flawlessly into the cauldron of racial and sexual intolerance that defined the era of the East Coast of America. Every line from the artist is perfectly honed to complete this immersion into the experience. And it's a masterpiece. So they're doing what they can to get people to read this and stuff, right? But my favorite part is where he ends up in this one little town, and he looks around, and he talks to someone, and they trick the readers. He messes with perception. Alan Moore does. So he's talking to someone like in a bakery, right? And then he's saying he's going to go to his hotel. And then the next thing you know, the green trees now look like it's autumn. And the reader's sort of like, man, look, that tree, fall must be coming pretty quick. This makes no sense. He ends up spending months in this town because he doesn't realize he's possessed. That's what's wild. So yeah, like I said, another Alan Moore experience, and the thing where you don't just read through this. This isn't a Bendis story where you read it in 30 seconds. You sit down and you enjoy it and you think about it and you go back and forth in the book. It's really good. All right. Really good. Listen to me. It's good. And the other one's good. And this other stuff's good. Give me a break. Okay. So this I keep, and I'm trying to come around to it, and I'm going to have to get volume 3. I know he didn't finish this. And it just kills me. It just kills me how they do this character. This character in her own story does absolutely nothing, yet gets all kinds of credit. And then they give you the idea that poor Halo Jones, she's going to finally do something in the future. And that's why it gets on my nerves. She's getting credit for doing nothing. I'm like, she's the lead in this story. Things are going on around her, and she's not effective. And I don't understand what I'm like, is this a joke? Am I missing the joke? Right. And I really have to contain myself, but it's the Ballad of Halo Jones. What is wild is I like Ian Gibson. I've read some of his Mr. Miracle stuff for DC. I've seen some of his other stuff for 2000 AD. Fantastic artist. Even his art in this gets on my nerves. It just blows my mind. So yeah, full disclosure, I'm always trying to check out Halo Jones. Maybe I need to finish this to see what's going to happen. But I feel like it's the worst thing Alan Moore has ever wrote. Like if we had a top, yeah, from bottom to top of his best stuff, this is on the bottom. And I won't say people defend it to me, but they're just as confused by my reaction to it because they enjoy it as I am to them. Like, how could you enjoy this? She does nothing. That's what gets me. I don't know. They even had a scene where it's in the future and she's being brought up in a history class at a college or something. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't get it. I've been told maybe you had to be there. Like 2000 AD was like pure testosterone with Judge Dredd and Strodium Dog and all this stuff like that. So they decided they needed something a little bit feminine in there. I don't know. I don't get it. If you get it, I'm very happy for you. But I have my Red Sonja, my Vampirella, a few other things. I don't get it. I just don't get it. Okay, guys, now we're getting to the low-hanging fruit here, right? We're getting to the low-hanging fruit here, right? So I highly recommend Supreme, Alan Moore's Supreme. I really do. If you enjoyed his Superman work, but never can I believe that a man comes in, he does an annual and a 2-part story. He pops up a little bit in Swamp Thing. Did he do anything else on here? Oh, and a DC Comics Presents. And every story he did for Superman, Alan Moore, is a classic. Every one of them, some of the greatest Superman stories, and so few issues and stuff, right? So I have multiples, or I'm pretty sure I still do. I have multiples. This was the stuff I was able to read off the stand. Lucky for me. You know what I mean? But yeah, whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow? DC Comics presents. What was it? Yeah, the Jungle line from DC Comics presents number 85, and then of course the classic, but for the Man Who Has Everything, Superman Annual 11, and then in Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, Superman 423, Action Comics 583. So you can actually get this in soft. I gave my soft cover to a fellow reader who used to work with me to check this stuff out. But everybody that's if I as long as I don't overhype it and I let people read this stuff in real life that I've handed them over the years, they end up absolutely loving this. And these are Marvel zombies, you know what I mean? That I've let that I've sort of gotten into reading this stuff, right? But anyway, this main story is what happened was is we had Crisis on Infinite Earth, right? It's time to reboot the universe. And then Alan Moore came in and he spun a bit of a story, acting like he was at a dinner and he reached over and grabbed a person, said, I have to do this story. He did want to do this story. So Alan Moore, being a Silver Age Superman fan, he ends up writing the last Superman story of the Silver Age persuasion, right? Because across the Infinite Earth, they got rid of the multiverse. We have one Earth. It's time to reboot Superman and build up to his 50th anniversary. And John Byrne was coming in there. So they were giving us a goodbye to this, right? This story has been referenced in Jeff Loeb. Was it Carlos Panchua? Anyway, Jeff Loeb in his Superman Batman series, he ended up referencing the story and actually kind of changing the ending a little bit. That's what was so funny. It was pretty cool how he did it, right? So I highly recommend it because everything happened. Everything happened. All his villains popped up. Everything that Superman was ever afraid of happened in those two issues. George Perez Inks, Kurt Swan, Kurt Schaeferberger also came in there. But this is the last Superman story. The Legion of Superheroes pop up. He takes all his family and friends, well, mostly his friends at this point, to the Fortress of Solitude because somebody is going after all of them. Pete Ross is tortured by the Toy Man and a few other people out of a pop-up box, Superman's secret identity while he was on live camera giving the news for GBS or whatever it was. A bunch of Superman toys came in and burned his clothes off. Anyway, everything that Superman was afraid of happened what happened. And he started noticing that his villains who were annoying become killers. What's going to happen with the killers when they pop up? So this has some very touching moments, man. What happened to Crypto really got me. Okay. Jimmy Olsen and Lana Lang. Lana Lang willing to lay it on the line because she really loves Superman. Clark and all that stuff. It really gets into what it is. It was a very respectful way to go. That's it. That was a fantastic story. I'm gonna end up reading that tonight. All right, guys. As I said, right there, right now on the other side of this is one I could talk about forever because this is the one where Alan Moore kind of disowns it, right? But anyway, the Killing Joke. Brian Bolland, as in Holland, Brian Bolland. Terry Jones, if you're watching, I learned it's Brian Bolland. And there's a lot of great stuff that came out of this. This is a fantastic Joker story. The masses have spoken, okay, and at first I first heard that Alan was sort of like, I'm not really proud of it because he wrote it in a formulaic way, right? He was taking metaphor, symbolism, simile, and he was putting it in here. He had done that in Watchmen. He had done that in a little bit in Swamp Thing. But when I first heard him complain about it, like in the early '90s, I think it was because it's not the best written thing that he had done. And then all of a sudden it came into the Batgirl thing and how people took Batman to the dark side and all the stuff that was already going on with Frank Miller. So I don't know what the deal is. I think it had more to do with either Alan recently, a couple months ago, came out with a little tiny short video or something, stream or whatever you want to call it, reel, whatever, where I think he had another book coming out, an actual novel. He's doing novels, Jerusalem, and then I think this was a follow up for Jerusalem. And he kind of apologized for some of the things he said over the last decades, and he kind of was trying to he may have just said it that he was saying these things on purpose to kind of get attention and stuff, be a character of a character, if you will, right? And I still feel like it doesn't matter what he says, the masses have spoken, and this is a classic. Brian Bolland, of all people, well, had problems with the way it was colored. So we get an edition of where he was able to do the recoloring years later, and that's what this is. The deluxe edition, there's an absolute edition, and you can totally see where he was going with it. Unfortunately, there are pages that I feel that I could show from the original coloring that help with the psychology of the story more. Okay. So a lot of stuff to unpack with this one, not just the fact that you can read it from beginning to end and it's a cohesive, exciting story. Um, Two classics, I say get them. Don't worry about what Alan says. Okay. Alan Moore's one of the things that cracks me up that he ever said is that writers are not supposed to give people what they want. They're supposed to give them what they need. I'm sitting here like you're writing for an audience that are going to pay. You know what I mean? You don't pander to them, but don't think you know what they need. That's what anyway. You serve the story and the character. Here we go. Yeah, okay. No new comments. Oh, which way do I go? Yeah, we'll go this way. We'll go this way. Okay. Okay, here we go. All right. We'll just jump into here, right? This, out of everything that Alan Moore did from issue 20 to, I don't know, 63 or 64 of Swamp Thing, excuse me, my Appalachian accent is coming out. With Swamp Thing, this is my favorite issue where he's on the blue planet, okay, where he took him to sci-fi, issue 56. So I grab these every chance I get when I run across them and a dollar bin to have reader copies, right? But we have book six. Here we go. So Alan Moore knocked it out of the ballpark as soon as he got to America, right? He did an issue of Swamp Thing. I want to say it's issue 20, where he was kind of wrapping up what was it, Martin Pasco. He literally tied some threads together to end that run. And at the end of it, he literally shot and killed Swamp Thing. He did this with Captain Britain. Do I have his Captain Britain down here? I may have his Captain Britain, but he did this at Marvel UK with Captain Britain also. He destroyed the character and then rebuilt him back up, right? From atoms, right? So we have that's a hell of a cliffhanger to do when you start a new book. Nobody knows who you are. Swamp Thing is shot down, took down in a blaze of glory, if you will, right? And then he is frozen, and the powers that be that have taken him, we go into the next issue, issue 21, I believe, the anatomy lesson. Anatomy lesson is required reading for comic book readers, in my opinion. It reads like an old 1950s movie in the Floronic Man's point of view, and it has this noir feel to it. And I feel like I hear Vincent Price's voice as the Floronic Man is walking us through the story. Because basically he ended up dissecting. He ended up dissecting the Swamp Thing. The anatomy lesson. He has lungs that they're not functional. They're vegetation that has been grown to look like lungs, but they don't function. And every part of his body during the autopsies is what he finds. And it was so cool because after he's sitting there and he's thinking about it, the Floronic Man just looks at the corpse and says, "Get up, you're not dead." And we find out that there's a whole other origin that's to the Swamp Thing. He is not Alec Holland. He is an elemental of the green of the world who got mixed up with some planarian worms who had eaten the corpse of Alec Holland, and planarian worms are able to pass memories on genetically. and we get the Swamp Thing who thinks he's human, thinks he's Alec. So Alan Moore talks, he brings him back to his horror roots. And at the same time, he starts talking a little bit about humanity and things like that. Alec, this Swamp Thing now has to absorb and accept what he is, and what he's not. Brilliant. And then he finds love with Abby. And Abby her soul ends up being taken to hell. And that's just the first two volumes, I mean, 2 or 3 volumes. We return him to his horror roots. We have the demon popping up. He deals with the Floronic Man. We find out what the green is and how it's all around us and how powerful it is. And then all of a sudden we get into the mystic side of the DC universe, where Swamp Thing decides to go to hell to bring Abby back. And we run into Deadman and Spectre and the Phantom and then the Demon, Jack Kirby's Demon. And long story short, there's a rose that grows in hell where Abby's soul used to be. So great stuff, right? Many things happen there, and eventually Alan Moore becomes rejuvenated when he's able to take him out to outer space, and we get to have these fantastic sci-fi stories right up there with the greats. What's going on with Swamp Thing? He's been cut off from the green, but there's other planets with vegetation, if you will. Runs into Thangarians and Thangarians and Adam Strange. Those they're having wars, and he ends up being what was it? There's an offspring out there of Swamp Thing because he is taken by this life form, if you will, for the whole point of conceptioning a baby. He ends up on a planet where all the vegetation is sentient. Anytime he tries to grow into something, it's like he's torturing the bodies, things like that. A lot of great thought in there and stuff, right? A lot of really deep subjects in there. Good stuff, right? And let's just get to the point. We know what we're waiting for. We know what Alan Moore's most famous work is. Most celebrated work, maybe not most famous, his most celebrated work. As much as I love this, at this point, it is low-hanging fruit. What do we got here? Oh, Gore Vidal is here. Great to see you. Thomas Bagley is here. Okay, Thomas Bagley, Grant Morrison's Crawling from the Wreckage arc of Doom Patrol is essentially the anatomy lesson for that title. That is the reboot. That's a lot to think of. Yeah, the Grant Morrison, Alan Moore, the Grant Morrison thing that he has for Alan Moore, or is it Warren Ellis? Warren Ellis and Moore. Anyway, I think it's Warren Ellis and Alan Moore. One of them has more envy, if you will. But yeah, the Crawling from the Wreckage. Yeah, see, that was the thing. I skipped Grant Morrison's Animal Man because I was like, man, they're just bringing in another British guy, giving him a B-list character, C-list character, and he's going to Swamp Thing it. That's exactly what I was thinking, and turns out I missed out stupidly, right? So with Morrison's Crawling from the Wreckage, I came in a little bit late because it wasn't on the newsstand. I already had Doom Patrol on my pull list with Cooper Berg and Steve Lytle, Eric Larson, and then around Invasion, right before Morrison came on, it was not on the stand, so I had to catch up. Gore Vidal, evening, Tim. Glad you're doing this. Like we've spoken before, it is important to appreciate artists like Moore while they're still with us. 72, I can't believe it. I can't believe it either. And like I said, I'm just kind of getting to the point with this. This is just a smell of what's on I'm just doing what's on the shelf since you may have gotten here late. Just what's behind me here for a few minutes here. The first time I heard about, and then we have Thomas Bagley. The first time I ever heard of the Winchester House was from Moore's Swamp Thing. Yeah. And yeah. Now, if I remember right, that's a real house where the person who owned it went crazy and he just kept adding onto it. And it's a real place. Gore Vidal, HBO is working on a V for Vendetta series. I skipped. Where is that? I'm glad you said that. Here's the Swamp Thing books I was going to show. And I completely forgot the V for Vendetta on here. I have some of this stuff signed by the artists. I've gotten to meet both artists on that series, right? Yeah, V for Vendetta. I was getting ready to say, I'm glad you brought that up. I completely skipped it. V for Vendetta, there are things in here that are amazing, but basically the interview I saw and read, thanks, and I'm sure it's on YouTube, was basically this was Alan Moore making a story of what it would be like in Margaret Thatcher's England. Okay, and the story, they've already made a movie 20 years ago. It is what it is. There were certain scenes I was so glad that they put in the movie. They got the they got the Evie part right, where she is in the dungeon and she's getting the pieces of toilet paper with the life story of a person in the next cell that will tear your heart out because these said that really happened to him. Things like that. But this is going to be an HBO series. And I actually saw James Gunn say it on, report that on X. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see. But here we are, guys. Here we are. We have made it with what's on my shelf. Let me double check here. Let me look around. I've actually pulled out all this stuff. Okay, guys. So there's probably like a Captain Britain somewhere, reprint mix. Excuse me. There may be a few things scattered up here, maybe in the Batman side. I don't know. But this is the main section. Okay, but we're going to get to it. Watchmen. Just put in Howler Mouse Watchmen. You're going to see a ton of stuff. Years ago, I think in 2013 or 14, there's a 10 in my playlist. There is a 10 part. There should be a 10 part, 12 part video playlist where other YouTubers, we all took a chapter. I did chapter 1 and chapter 12, and other YouTubers took it each issue of Watchmen. But this is the one. This is the trade from 1988. For you people who've never heard the story, and I went nuts when I saw the copyright date of this, trying to make sure I remember. But I know I was 15 when I read this. But anyway, so you heard about Watchmen, right? If you did not have a comic book store, you couldn't miss it. The ads were in the comics. Who watches the Watchmen was everywhere. People were getting a little bit of a buzz of this, and Watchmen didn't really take off. At least I don't know how I've heard in the comic book shops and things that through other YouTubers that, oh yeah, it took off, but it's when the trade was available that it really started gaining a lot of ground for people who weren't in the shops, right? And of course, we know all about this. And when this is an award-winning story. This is a story that they actually have in classes at colleges, that teach literature. This is a complete story where you're supposed to sit down and go back and forth in it because Dave Gibbons' artwork references itself in this. You go back and forth. There is symbolism, foreshadowing, metaphor. Okay, so much in here. The human condition, philosophy, politics. This is what if heroes were in the real world, and why would they do that? We gave our mythology and our mythology. We gave the figures of mythology and the archetypes feet of lead. Everybody is flawed. Some people are psychotic. Some people have sexual fetishes. Some people are just need to grow up because they see things in black and white and all sorts of things, right? And there's a lot of people that over the last 10 years, I've seen one YouTuber actually take the time to break down why they did not like Watchmen. Razor Fist. Okay, so everybody else, it's one thing if you read it and give it a chance and don't like it, not a big deal, not a big deal. But I've noticed that it's been an edgy thing to say that you hate Watchmen, and, oh, it's overrated and things like that. That's fine. The whole thing is that we cannot ignore the merits in what it did. It did several things that brought validity to comics, not graphic novel, comics. Um, this was a well written, well drawn, thought out. There's so many things in here that you reach a point to where you don't know what was planned and what was just where they were in the zone ended up happening on itself. Alan Moore says issue number 3 is where Watchmen became Watchmen, and you can see that. I think the most well crafted comic of all time is number 2, where everybody is remembering their time with the comedian while they're standing over his grave at his funeral, things like that. Yeah, to me, this is the most well constructed comic book of all time. Forget the other 11 issues and stuff, right? So we could just gush about this, but, Dick Giordano, He worked at Charlton Comics. Charlton Comics was going out of business. Dick Giordano was high up at DC. He had a soft spot for these, for Blue Beetle and Captain Atom and Peacemaker and all these other characters. So Alan Moore comes in and he writes this story where they can tell that this is something more than they ever could have imagined. But we want to use these characters later, so they are archetypes. The Charlton heroes became, Alan Moore started noticing they were archetypes of your science heroes and your Batman and things like that, your sci-fi hero, your noir and things like that. But I mean, you can go on and on and on about Watchmen. And the thing about it is with Watchmen, I finally reached a point in the last year or so where I just like to describe it. Everything means something, but not everything means much. Okay, that's just it. Um, and here's my limited edition slipcase I got at an auction from a friend of mine that passed away. I was lucky to meet him. A little didn't get to know him well, but I was very lucky to get to meet him. But yeah, this is a limited edition that came out in the '60s. I was able to gain, but I have multiple. I have two full sets of Watchmen issues, a bunch of multiple issues, everything that came out. I grab it. I don't have the action figures and stuff like that. But yeah, Alan Moore gave us Watchmen, and Alan Moore this also led to him being very bitter in comics, I guess, a little bit. Thank goodness Dave Gibbons carries the torch. The before Watchmen that came out, half of that was garbage, and then half of it was very well done. Doomsday Clock, that's already forgotten about. Let's face it, that came and went. But you don't have to worry about those because all you have to do is just go pick up one of these, right? And they have been in print since the late '80s. I have hardback editions that came with the Blu-ray movie. I have a compact comics that you can get for $10. Just sit down and enjoy this, read it, take your time, and when you start noticing what's going on, just flip back and forth through it. It's made for you to flip back and forth through it. Because it references itself. You know. But anyway, guys, let's read the comments, and that'll be about it because that's what's on the shelf behind me, and I need to go. I got a few things to do. Oh, let me see what we have here. Stick around for these comments, guys. Looks like we have quite a few. All right, Gore Vidal, we need to do a show together, Gore. And Paolo, if you're out there, we need to do a show together. Gore Vidal, at my LCS, a frequent customer often tells me his favorite film is V for Vendetta, and yet he hasn't read the comic. It is frustrating listening to him at times. Yes, that's what I feel like we talked about this, or I've had this talk before with someone. The Marvel movies, it took me a little bit to figure out that people are not interested in the comics. And that's what the Marvel movies showed me. My wife is actually one of them. She loves her manga. I turned her on to some anime that was based on manga, and she has a whole library upstairs now. But when it comes to the Marvel movies, she could do a trivia contest and win, but not interested in the comics. Blows my mind. It really does. I'm with you on that one. But I've learned to accept it. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, Uh, then we have Afro SF. V for Vendetta was set on an alternate Earth where Mike Moran forgot his magic word. Oh, that would be great. Gore Vidal, Tim's Watchmen videos are Watchmen 101 and graduate level viewing. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. It's one of the very few things when it comes to how much the Watchmen stuff, I really enjoy talking about them. Yeah. There's always, I still found things in there. Just, I don't know, about a year or two with a reading that I still had not put together. Paolo, I remember Watchmen getting a lot of advertising when the foreign edition started around 1988 or 89. For some people, it was an American comic they admitted they read. Yeah, it's interesting. It's two Europeans, English gentlemen, doing a book about America. You could also say their viewpoint of what America is supposed to be in there. Their viewpoint of what America looks like, or how that's a discussion you have too. Is this set in New York, or is this set in what a romanticized sort of idea of what it looks like from people outside of the country? I know what I'm trying to say, but I'll get there. Thomas Bagley, ironically, Watchmen probably works better with the archetypes rather than the Charlton characters, especially since I think more use Dr. Solar more as a basis for Dr. Manhattan and Captain Atom. That is a great observation. Solar. That is, yeah, okay. You made me pause there. I'm going to take that in. 100 Cool Kid points to Thomas Bagley for bringing in the Dr. Solar thing. Gorbat, oh, yes, that will be great. Absolutely, sir. We needed to get together here. Okay, Palo Costo. I'm game. Let's try to find a Saturday, but it would have to be later in the day. I will get back to you on that. Messenger is probably where I'll give you a yell. I'm I'm thinking maybe this Saturday we have Thanksgiving coming up next weekend. Anyway, Gore, Palo, we'll talk. Yeah. And then also love Tim's annual planetary reviews. Thomas Bagley. For you people that don't know, I have planetary reviews up, and they took as long to do as the actual comic came out. It took a decade to get 27 issues out. I kind of quit because people were not watching them. At the time, my videos were averaging up to 500 views minimum. And I've never really done this for the views. That's long since passed. And I quit doing them. Nobody really noticed. And then I don't know, around the pandemic, I think some people started kind of asking for me to finish them. So I did it. I did one or two more, and exactly 43 views I remember, because that was exactly how many people over the course of 3 or 4 months asked me to do them. They all showed up. So that's great. All right, guys. Thanks for popping in. Happy birthday, Alan Moore. Gore, we need to do a show. Palo, we need to do a show. See what we can do. See what we can do. It's a Tuesday. I'm working all the way through Friday. So yeah, we'll figure something out. Thanks, guys, for popping in. Read your comics, share the video, subscribe, like, hit the button, leave comments there in the future. And yeah, guys, just be excellent to each other. Happy, yeah. Gore, I know we were all disappointed for Tim's. Okay, I want to read this because I catch these every time after I go off the air. Gore Vidal, I know we all are. I know we are all disappointed for Tim. Alan Moore never wrote a Booster Gold maxi series. Yes, yes. Oh God, Alan Booster Gold has infiltrated everything I love, and that's probably all that's left for that to happen. All right, guys, everybody, be excellent to each other. Read your comics, and happy birthday, Alan Moore. Later, guys. Oh God, that was funny.